Hello, friends. Today we're going to discuss a topic that's interesting, profound, and I would say extremely instructive. Let's talk about Polish agriculture, about our dear farmers. If you've been following Polish news feeds even a little lately, you probably have the impression that the Polish countryside, Polish agriculture, is on the verge of a complete, final, and irreversible collapse. Newspaper headlines have gone into real hysteria. Crops are dying, diesel fuel is eating up the last pennies, big corporations are robbing farmers blind, and government inspectors are hiding behind every bush with inspection forms and fines. Well, it would seem that's the end of the story. The Polish agro-industrial sector is going under. Well, it's time to call it quits. But we are rational people used to getting to the heart of things. Let's strip away the emotion and all the froth and lay out the facts. Let's sort everything out and see how this system actually works. And at the end, yes, watch the video until the end. I promise we will definitely recall an interesting historical parable about how actions from the recent past come back to haunt us. We'll discuss everything now. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Friends, thank you so much to everyone who takes just 2 seconds for these simple actions. Thank you for your support for the aerodynamics and for the working class as well. Well, let's get down to business. The first part, our first time code, is about what makes up the current situation of the suffering Polish farmer. If you put together the news reports from industry portals, you get an epic picture where the poor farmer is being attacked from all 4 sides at once. Climate hit. The first thing they write about, let's take the press from Lublin and other voivodeships as an example, is of course the weather, extreme heat. The drought is literally scorching the crops. The farmer's position here is simple and clear. Nature has betrayed us. The harvest is ruined. Give us government compensation. But let's think about it. What are government compensation payments in essence? It's like trying to put out a blazing fire with a glass of water. When a farm relies year after year not on its own financial safety net, not on irrigation technology, but on direct subsidies from the budget, it immediately becomes directly dependent on the bureaucratic apparatus. The farmer turns into a petitioner who sits at the ministry window waiting for the next handout. Well, in Poland's case, the next grosz. The farm's autonomy disappears, and any delay in payments from the center is perceived as a catastrophe of universal proportions. Second point, the fuel price squeeze. The second horseman of this apocalypse, prices at the pump. Modern agriculture is not a horse with a plow, it's heavy fuel-hungry machinery, which runs on diesel fuel. Diesel in the modern agricultural sector is a lifeline. Without it, you can't plow, sow, or cultivate. You also can't transport the harvest to the grain elevator or the port, wherever it needs to go. And now farmers look at gas stations and prices in horror and throw up their hands. The purchase prices for their own products, under market pressure, either stay the same or fall, and fuel prices are slowly creeping up. This creates a classic price squeeze. Costs are rising, incomes are shrinking, working capital is burning up right in the fuel tanks of tractors, and once again, the familiar refrain returns. Hey, dear government, you haven't forgotten about us, have you? Help us out. Subsidize diesel fuel. Third point, corporate collusion and a monopoly stranglehold. Yes, while drought can still be blamed on an irresistible force of nature, the next blow came from the realm of purely human relations. And the blow was as telling as it gets. While the farmers were complaining about the weather, the Polish Office of Competition and Consumer Protection was conducting an investigation, and it uncovered a spicy detail. It turns out that for years the farmers had been overpaying huge amounts of money for farm equipment, for tractors, and so on. Large dealers and manufacturers simply organized a cartel, artificially inflating the prices of machines and spare parts. So, while the rural worker was sweating and toiling to earn his meager wages, the big players in the equipment market were squeezing everything out of him, forcing him into debt traps and bank loans just to buy a tractor. Whether it was just another one or not is beside the point. Capital, as it should, was extracting super profits from its monopoly, and the small and medium producers were, of course, paying for it out of their own pockets. The fourth point is bureaucracy. And as if all of this wasn't enough, state bureaucracy enters the stage. Instead of reducing administrative pressure during a crisis, farmers are told, now you'll be getting inspections without any warning. Sudden inspections, strict control over compliance with European Union environmental standards, checking every document related to received subsidies, and the farmer finds himself caught in a vice. From below, he's squeezed by economics and the weather, and from above, an official with a checklist and the threat of withdrawing subsidies. Looking at all this, you really want to shed a tear. Let's put it this way. It's an unenviable situation from a human perspective. How can you survive in such conditions? Here we move on to the second act of our ballet, dry numbers versus emotional weeping. And now, dear friends, let's do something that the organizers of agricultural protests and fans of loud political slogans really don't like to do. How could we do without them? Let's take a look at the dry, dispassionate statistical reports. For example, the ones written by TVN24. And here, as they say, here's a real twist. While the agricultural unions were predicting total collapse and newspapers were filled with headlines about the death of the Polish countryside, the official economic indicators showed a completely different reality. It turns out that despite the drought, expensive fuel, greedy tractor dealers, and nitpicking inspectors, the Polish agricultural sector is showing record results. Polish agricultural exports have not only failed to collapse, but are confidently breaking new records, actively entering the markets of the Middle East, Asia, and even Europe itself. The incomes of large and medium-sized medium-tech farms have increased. The supply chains are working like clockwork, and the processing sector is feeling more than okay. How is this possible, you might ask? Some constantly complain and warn of disaster, yet barns are full, trade balances are growing, and revenues are in the billions. Where is the truth? What is really happening? And the truth, my dear friends, is actually very simple. We are dealing with the classic duality of any developed market. What is a deadly problem for a small, poorly mechanized farmer who lives off subsidies is just a routine issue, a routine episode for a large agricultural holding. Large businesses, thanks to their scale, efficient logistics, and high prices for end products, can easily absorb both expensive fuel and drought. My God, we'll even find a way to handle the inspectors. And the loud cries of agricultural officials about the apocalypse are not a description of a real forum. This is the state of affairs in the industry. It's a highly effective tool for putting pressure on the government, and this scheme has been perfected over the years. You go out onto the highway, you block the roads, you shout to all the media that the drought has wiped everything out, and you get fresh budget infusions, sometimes even billions. Tax breaks and fuel discounts are just business, nothing personal. So next we have the third act of our ballet, friends. The boomerang effect of the spilled grain, we'll talk about that too, an event from the not-so-distant past. Remember, not so long ago, amid the farmers' protests in Poland, there were some rather peculiar stunts going on. When Polish farmers were blocking the borders, they were dumping Ukrainian grain from wagons and trucks right onto the asphalt, onto the rails, into the dirt. What slogans were they using? We are protecting our market. This grain is of poor quality. So you don't get poisoned, but it lowers our prices. We won't let anyone profit from our land. Back then, many thought it was just an experiment. It looked like a display of a united farming force protecting the national producer. But I'll tell you this, grain grown by someone else's labor was mixed with dirt to the applause of local politicians who played and continue to play the card of national egoism. And what do we see now, after just a little time has passed? Karma is stubborn and has a great sense of humor. The boomerang that was launched from the barricades at the border back then made a perfect arc and landed in exactly the same place. Did you selfishly scatter another person's bread? Now you get drought and heat that destroy your own crops. It's as if nature showed that bread is a product of hard work and no one should treat it sacrilegiously. Did you shout that you were being prevented from working honestly? Well, now you get an investigation that clearly showed it wasn't your neighbors with the grain who were robbing you, but your own people, Polish monopolists and equipment sellers. The very same ones who smiled at you so nicely at exhibitions, but behind your back were making deals on how to take you to the cleaners over some tractor. Did you, dear farmers, demand complete freedom and protection from competition? Well, now you get a ruthless bureaucratic machine that checks your every move, counts every penny of your subsidies without warning. And it turned out that the main enemies of the Polish farmer were not sitting in Ukrainian trucks with wheat at all. These were not the guys dying at the border. Truck drivers were the ones who lost their lives there. The main enemies were sitting on the boards of monopolistic companies that inflated the prices of equipment, in the offices of fuel giants that drove up the price of diesel. And in that very market system where small producers are always sacrificed for the profits of the big players. The so-called help and protection they shouted so much about at the border boiled down to a simple truth. From real problems, climate, monopolists, and fuel prices, no amount of dumped foreign grain on the tracks can save them. Comment. Dennis, what are you talking about? You need to give up your Polish passport. It's been a while since that happened, but people write that daily. So let's move on to the conclusions. What conclusions can we draw from this instructive story? Polish agriculture, of course, won't disappear tomorrow or the day after. It won't collapse. Large agribusinesses will come out of this situation even richer, even more consolidated, will enter new export markets and will weather all the droughts combined. But the small farmer who first burned tires on the roads and destroyed other people's work and today is crying because of the drought, diesel prices and inspections, he found himself in the position of a classic tragicomedy hero. He looked for someone to blame everywhere except where the real culprits actually were. He thought, of course you can. What's the big deal? To dump grain in the dirt with impunity and demand respect for yourself. But in the end, he was left alone with the scorching sun, the monopoly collusion of equipment sellers, and a government official holding a report in his hands. That's the harsh and very instructive reality of life. That's how it goes. So, although it's unlikely that it's unlikely that Polish farmers are watching my videos, but friends, I'm just explaining how this happens and what actually was to be expected. Sooner or later, it had to happen. So, friends, still, despite everything, thank you very much for your attention. I send my regards to the working class, turners, fitters, milling machine operators, absolutely everyone, computer guys, builders, welders, and farmers too. Why not? That's the update. Leave a like, leave comments, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. That's all for now. See you next time.